If you've ever stayed in an Airbnb, this next part is going to ruin that for you. Because in both of tonight's stories, the danger wasn't outside the house. It was already inside, watching the guests, before they even realized they weren't alone. I never planned on spending the first week of October alone in a rental cabin deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains. But after the breakup and the sleepless, suffocating weeks that followed, I needed distance from my apartment in Raleigh, from the job that drained me, from the memories that refused to stay quiet. Asheville seemed perfect, quiet, artsy, surrounded by endless woods that swallowed sound and thought alike. When I found the cabin on Airbnb Sunset Ridge Retreat, the photos felt almost unreal. A-frame roof, wraparound deck, a stone fireplace, tall windows facing a valley of red and gold autumn trees. The reviews were glowing, the price was surprisingly reasonable, and the host, a man named Douglas, replied to my message in less than 5 minutes. "You'll love it up here. House is all yours. I live about 20 minutes away, so text me if you need anything." I remember thinking how polite he sounded, reassuring, almost too quick to respond, but I didn't question it. I just wanted to breathe somewhere that didn't smell like stale coffee and regret. When I arrived late Friday evening, the sky was already dark, and fog moved between the trees like slow ghosts. The cabin's lights glowed warmly from the inside, and for a moment, stepping out of my car, I felt the unfamiliar sensation of quiet peace. I carried my bags in, inhaled the scent of pine and old wood, and told myself that for once, I'd done something good for myself. I heard the first noise around 11 p.m. It was faint, a soft scrape somewhere above the ceiling while I unpacked in the bedroom. I froze, listening. It came again, a dragging sound, like something heavy sliding across wood. I told myself it was the house settling, the way mountain cabins did in the cool night air. And because I wanted this trip to be a reset, a chance to regain some sense of calm, I forced myself to ignore the instinctive chill crawling up my spine. The second noise, though, that one was impossible to pretend away. At around 1:30 a.m., just as I was drifting off on the couch with a blanket wrapped around me, something thumped above me, directly above me, hard enough that the ceiling lamp rattled. I shot upright, my heart pounding. The cabin had only one floor and an attic space that wasn't mentioned in the listing. I checked my phone, found Douglas's number, and texted, "Hey, sorry to bother you so late. Just heard something in the attic. Sounds like something fell." He replied in under 10 seconds. "Totally normal. Old beams. They pop at night when it gets cold." The speed of the reply unsettled me. It was almost as if he were watching the phone. But I reminded myself that some hosts were just responsive and helpful. I set my phone down, turned off the lights, and tried to sleep. That's when I heard the footsteps. Slow, measured, crossing the attic directly over the living room. The sound was unmistakable, wood bending under the weight of a person. I felt every muscle in my body tighten. Breath caught in my chest like a held scream. I whispered into the quiet, "No, I'm imagining this." But imagination doesn't make floorboards creak with footsteps. Imagination doesn't make dust fall from the ceiling with each step. I barely slept. By sunrise, I convinced myself it had to have been an animal. A raccoon, maybe a possum. Something light enough to make noise, but heavy enough to sound like footsteps when amplified by the hollow attic space. That morning, I explored the cabin in daylight. Everything seemed fine, peaceful even. I made coffee, stepped onto the deck, watched the fog lift from the valley below. For a few hours, the night felt far away. I even laughed at myself, embarrassed by how easily my anxiety had taken over. But that afternoon, while taking photos of the living room, I noticed something strange. In the reflection of the tall window, behind me, the ceiling vent, a rectangular metal grate near the top of the wall, seemed slightly ajar. I turned, squinting up at it. The vent was definitely open, just by an inch or two, enough to see darkness behind it, and something else, right at the edge, something pale. I climbed onto a chair, using my phone flashlight to get a better look. The pale shape retreated instantly, not scurrying, pulling back, smoothly, silently, like a hand. I stumbled off the chair, nearly falling. My blood felt cold. Every instinct screamed that someone was up there, watching me. I texted the host again. "The attic vent is open. Looks like something is moving up there. Are you sure the cabin is empty?" He replied instantly again. Too instantly. "No worries. Squirrels get in sometimes. They move vents. Totally harmless." He added a smiley face. A smiley face. Something about that broke the fragile denial I'd been clinging to. I responded, "It didn't look like a squirrel." No reply. Minutes passed, then an hour. The silence made everything worse. At 6 p.m., the lights flickered, just once, but long enough for me to see movement again in the reflection of the window near the hallway leading to the bedroom, a shadow slipping out of sight. I ran to the bathroom, locked the door, and forced myself to breathe quietly. I told myself to call the police, but what would I say? There's a guy in the attic watching me through the vents? They'd ask if I saw a person, a face, a body. I hadn't, just a pale shape, and a shadow, and footsteps. My hypervigilance, all the anxiety I'd been battling since the breakup, made me doubt myself. Maybe it was my mind looking for threats where there were none. Maybe the host was right. Maybe this whole trip was a mistake. I stayed locked in the bathroom until the sky turned fully dark. Finally, I decided I couldn't stay in the cabin another night. I packed my things with shaking hands, refusing to look at the ceilings, the vents, or the shadowed corners that suddenly felt too still. When I stepped outside to load my car, I realized something terrifying. The woods were silent, completely. No crickets, no wind, no rustling, as if the whole forest was holding its breath. When I came back inside for the last bag, the cabin smelled different, warm, faintly musky, like someone had been there, recently. Then I heard it, a soft, deliberate exhale, from the attic vent above the hallway, and a whisper, a man's whisper. "Don't go yet." My body froze. My mind went white with panic. I grabbed the last bag, sprinted outside, locked myself in my car, and sped down the mountain road so fast I nearly slid off the gravel shoulder twice. I didn't stop driving until I reached downtown Asheville. I parked near a hotel, shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. When I finally checked my phone, I saw a message from the host, sent at 1:17 a.m. "You left in a hurry. Everything okay?" That wasn't what scared me. What scared me was the second message, sent while I was driving. "I think you saw me." I stared at that last message until the screen dimmed. "I think you saw me." My mind kept looping those 5 words, each pass colder than the last. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Not when my hands were trembling and my breath wouldn't come normally. I checked into the hotel under a different name, paid in cash, and slept with the lights on, or tried to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that pale shape pulling back behind the vent. I heard that whisper again, that soft, close, intimate whisper that didn't belong to someone 20 minutes away. The next morning, exhaustion had made everything feel warped and distant. Maybe that message wasn't literal. Maybe he meant saw me, as in I saw him on the property earlier. Maybe, no. I knew what I heard. What I felt. The cabin wasn't empty, and he hadn't been 20 minutes away. I decided to report the listing. At the hotel lobby, I sat with my coffee and forced myself to fill out an Airbnb safety complaint. Possible unauthorized person inside attic while cabin was rented. Host behaving suspiciously. I attached a long description, but halfway through writing, a terrible realization hit me. I hadn't actually checked the attic entrance. I hadn't seen if there was a ladder, a door, nothing. I only knew someone was up there because of sounds and shadows. What if Airbnb dismissed it as paranoia? What if Douglas convinced them I was imagining things? When I hit submit, the app said a case manager would contact me within 24 hours. 24 hours felt like years. I needed answers now. I should have gone home. I should have driven straight back to Raleigh and tried to forget the whole thing. But something about the cabin, the speed of his replies, the whisper, the smell in the house, it all gnawed at me. I needed to know how long he'd been up there. I needed proof, or maybe I needed closure. Either way, 2 hours later, I found myself driving back toward the mountain. I told myself I'd only go to the edge of the property just to see if his truck was there. Just to confirm whether this was real or some twisted echo of the breakup and the anxiety that still gripped me like a fist. As the road climbed higher, the woods thickened. Sunlight barely reached the ground. When I pulled off at the gravel turnout just before the cabin's driveway, I cut the engine and listened. Dead quiet. Again. As if the forest itself didn't want to draw attention to what lived at the end of that driveway. I left the car and moved through the trees, slow, careful, every step, crunching faintly over fallen leaves. From between two pines, I saw the cabin. Something was different. A window that had been closed the night before was open now, the curtain fluttering gently. And on the deck, a mug. A coffee mug. Steam rising from it. Someone was inside. I crouched behind a tree, pulse pounding. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe a car, maybe a sign the host had arrived. But I saw no vehicle, no movement, no figure. Just the open window and that steaming mug, as if the occupant had stepped away only seconds earlier. My throat tightened. I backed away silently, stumbling once on a root but catching myself before I made noise. I hurried to my car, slid in, and locked the doors, even though it felt useless against someone who could move inside walls. The drive back to Asheville was a blur. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone sitting in the back seat. I returned to the hotel, but I couldn't rest. Couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. Even in a populated lobby, even with sunlight flooding the windows, I felt eyes on me. Airbnb finally messaged me around 5 p.m. We've contacted the host. He states the cabin is completely safe and says you left abruptly due to personal anxiety issues. My stomach dropped. He was trying to frame me as unstable. The message continued. At this time, we cannot verify unauthorized access. Please provide evidence if you believe the host entered without permission. Evidence. The word burrowed under my ribs. They needed something concrete, something undeniable, and without it, I was just another anxious guest complaining about creaky floors. I paced my hotel room for over an hour, thinking of every possibility, every angle, every way to prove what I knew, that the cabin wasn't empty and hadn't been for a long time. I didn't want to go back. Every instinct told me I'd barely escaped. But the thought of doing nothing, of letting him keep renting that cabin, keep hiding above the ceilings, keep watching unsuspecting guests that thought ate at me. Around 7 p.m., the sun slipping behind the mountains, I made the worst decision of my life. I decided to go back one more time to get evidence. I told myself I would be fast. Get in, grab a photo or video of the vent, maybe record the noises if he was up there, then leave forever. I drove in darkness, headlights cutting through thickening fog. The mountain road twisted like a living thing. When I reached the cabin again, I parked farther away this time, off the road, hidden between birches. I held my phone like a weapon, though it was useless. The cabin was dark, no lights in the windows, no mug on the deck. It looked empty, but that meant nothing. I made my way to the back of the cabin where the attic vent was. My plan was to get a video of the vent slightly open, maybe capture movement or breathing. When I turned the corner, my breath caught. The vent wasn't slightly open, it was wide open, dark, gaping, as if something had crawled out. I raised my phone to record, and that's when I heard it inside the cabin. A slow, dragging step across the floor. Another. Then, a whisper through the wall, directly beside me. "You came back." My body locked. The voice wasn't muffled by distance. It was right behind the wall, inches away. I stepped back slowly, my feet crunching leaves. The dragging footsteps inside matched mine, moving in parallel. I didn't think I ran. Around the side of the cabin, through the trees, tripping over roots and rocks, branches whipped my arms. I kept running until I reached my car. I fumbled with the keys, got inside, and slammed the locks down. But I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think, because as I caught my breath, I realized something was terribly wrong. The rearview mirror. It was angled differently, tilted upward, toward the ceiling of the back seat. Someone had moved it. My hands froze on the steering wheel. And then, from the darkness behind me, beneath my own ragged breathing, I heard the softest sound. A slow inhale and a whisper. "Drive!" I screamed, turned the key, and the car lurched forward onto the gravel road. I didn't look back. Not once. I drove all the way to Raleigh without stopping, without checking the mirror again. I abandoned the car in the parking lot overnight because I couldn't bear to be inside it a moment longer. When police searched it the next morning, they found nothing. No fingerprints, no signs of forced entry, no DNA, no proof he had been there at all. The officer suggested I rest for a few days and maybe seek someone to talk to. Airbnb closed the case. The listing remained active. The cabin's calendar filled for the rest of the month. 3 days later, I received an email from a private, untraceable address. No subject line, no signature, just a single sentence. "I liked the way you slept." And attached was a photo of me, asleep on the couch in the cabin, taken from above, from the attic vent. I don't know what terrifies me more, the idea that he's still in that cabin watching new guests every night, or the possibility that he left the cabin with me, that he followed me back to Raleigh, that he never stopped watching, and that somewhere, in the walls or ceiling of this very apartment, he's still there, waiting for me to go to sleep again. My name is Daniel Ruiz, and in the spring of 2022, I booked a cheap Airbnb in Tampa, Florida, thinking it would be the perfect way to clear my head after months of burnout at work. I wasn't looking for anything fancy, just a place to sleep, decompress, and maybe grab some quiet mornings by the bay. What I got instead was the kind of experience that still wakes me up at night, sweating, convinced someone else is in the room with me. The listing looked ordinary. Cozy private room near downtown, warm lighting, minimal decor, and a smiling host named Marla, who described herself as hands-off, but available. The price was low enough to make me skeptical, but the recent reviews were positive. And honestly, I just wanted to get away from my apartment and from the memories of a breakup that still clung to every corner. When I arrived, the first strange thing happened almost immediately, though at the time I brushed it off. As I rolled my suitcase toward the entryway, I noticed another car parked in the driveway, a silver Honda with a layer of dust on it thick enough to write on. No plates, no inspection stickers. It looked abandoned. Before I had time to think about it, the front door opened and Marla appeared. She was in her late 40s, thin, with a long black braid and a smile that somehow didn't reach her eyes. She greeted me warmly, but her eyes kept darting toward the driveway. When I asked about the car, she stiffened in a way that didn't match her friendly tone. "Oh, that belonged to the previous guest," she said quickly. "He left it at the airport. It's being picked up soon." It didn't make sense. Why would someone leave their car in her driveway to catch a flight? But I was too tired to dig into it. Inside, the house smelled faintly of bleach, like someone had just scrubbed the place down. My room was clean, neat, and off. Something about the air felt stale, as if no one had opened a window in days. Marla gave me a brief tour, explained house rules, and then told me she lived in a small detached unit behind the property. "You'll have the house entirely to yourself," she said, "except the master bedroom. Just keep that door closed. It's where I store linens." She was trying too hard. People who have nothing to hide don't oversell their transparency. The first night was uneventful until around 3 a.m. when I woke up abruptly, feeling like I wasn't alone. I heard something, a soft shuffle like bare feet dragging along the carpeted hallway. At first, I thought it was the AC kicking on. But then, the sound moved. Slow, rhythmic, steady. My heart climbed into my throat as the steps approached my door, paused, then retreated. I lay frozen for a long time. The next morning, I convinced myself the house was settling. Old houses make noise. But as I made coffee in the kitchen, something chilled me. On the counter next to my mug was a second coffee mug, still damp, with a faint brown ring at the bottom. I hadn't used it. I checked the sink, the drying rack, the trash. Nothing else was out of place, just that mug. When I texted Marla about it, she insisted she hadn't entered the house. "I don't even drink coffee," she wrote. "Maybe you used it half awake? Travel fatigue is real." She added a smiley face at the end, which made me trust her even less. That afternoon, I took a walk to clear my head. When I returned, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Subtle, but there, something metallic, like blood or rust. It was strongest near the master bedroom door. I put my hand on the doorknob, ice cold. I pulled back. My instincts screamed at me not to touch it again. I decided to get out of the house for dinner. When I returned that night, The shift in the house's atmosphere was immediate. The lights seemed dimmer, the air felt heavier, and on the floor near the master bedroom, scattered in a tiny line, were small dark droplets of blood. I crouched down and touched one with my fingertip, still tacky, fresh. I stared at the doorknob. Someone was inside that room. Trying to convince myself I was imagining things, I locked myself in my room earlier than usual, wedging my suitcase against the door. Sleep didn't come easy. At 2:47 a.m., I heard it again. Footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps. Except this time, they didn't stop at my door. They continued down the hall, into the living room, then back toward the master bedroom. A muffled thump followed, like someone falling. I was shaking so badly I could barely breathe. I texted Marla again. Is someone staying in the master bedroom? Someone is walking around the house. She didn't respond. I stayed awake until dawn. When sunlight finally crept through the blinds, I opened my door cautiously and checked the house. The droplets were gone, completely cleaned. The mug from yesterday was gone too. The only new thing in the house was an object on the hallway table, a key card from a hotel in Tampa. Scratched, dirty, room number worn off. Someone had left it for me to find. I didn't want to stay another night, but when I grabbed my phone to book another place, the battery was dead, even though it had been charging all night. My laptop, dead. My power bank, dead. Every outlet in the room had been unplugged from the wall. At this point, I wasn't afraid of ghosts. I was afraid of a very real, very living person inside that house with me. Around noon, Marla finally replied, "I'll stop by around 6 tonight to check the locks." I didn't want her there at 6. I didn't want to be there at 6. Every instinct told me something was wrong with her. She knew more than she was saying. As the sun began to lower behind the trees, the air in the house grew colder again. Shadows stretched across the hallway unnaturally long, like something was blocking the light in places I couldn't see. And then it happened. While walking past the master bedroom door, I heard a sound so quiet, I almost dismissed it as my imagination. Breathing. Slow, shaky breathing on the other side of that door. I pressed my ear against the wood, and a voice whispered so close it felt like it was inches from me. "Don't open it." I stumbled backward, heart slamming against my ribs. That was when the doorknob rattled violently, as if someone inside was trying to force it open. I ran to my room, locked the door, shoved the suitcase against it again, and called 911 with my backup phone. The operator said she would send a patrol car, but response times were delayed. I waited. The house was silent for almost 20 minutes. Too silent. Then I noticed the closet door in my bedroom. It was slightly open. I didn't leave it like that. As I stared at the dark gap, something inside shifted just barely, but enough for me to see movement. Slow, human-like movement. And I realized, with a cold wave washing over me, that the master bedroom wasn't the only place someone could hide. Whoever, or whatever was in that house, had more than one way to get around. And whatever was in my closet was beginning to push the door open wider. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. My dreams kept looping the same image. Someone standing in the dark corner of the bedroom, facing the wall, breathing as if every inhale hurt. I tried to shake it off, telling myself stress was getting to me. But when I walked into the kitchen, I froze. The coffee mug I'd washed last night was back on the counter, half full, with a faint ring of steam still rising. Someone had used it, someone who wasn't me. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The base was warm. I checked the doors. Both were still deadbolted. The windows latched. Nothing made sense. For the first time, I wondered if I should just leave the Airbnb early. But a part of me, the stubborn part that hated backing down from anything, forced me to stay. I told myself I was imagining it, even though I knew damn well I wasn't. The host, Daniel, texted again around noon. "All good? Any questions?" The timing made my skin crawl. It was like he knew something was happening inside the house. I didn't reply. I spent most of the day out walking Tampa Riverwalk, grabbing food, trying to avoid the house. But eventually night came, and I had nowhere else to go. As soon as I stepped inside, the air felt heavier, like the humidity had thickened into something else, something alive. I showered, trying to wash off the anxiety clinging to my skin, but while I was toweling off, I heard it again, those slow, dragging footsteps in the hallway. I opened the bathroom door so fast, it slammed the wall. No one was there. I could see straight to the end of the hall. Empty. But the sound hadn't been coming from the hall. It had been coming from the bedroom. My bedroom. I hesitated, then slowly pushed the bedroom door open. The lamp I had left on was turned off. I know I didn't accidentally switch it. Someone had been in here. My throat tightened as I stepped inside. The room smelled wrong, stale sweat, and something metallic, like dried blood. I checked under the bed, in the closet, behind the curtains. Nothing, or at least nothing visible. I slept with the lights on, but I still woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of soft breathing right next to my ear. I jolted upright, gasping, slapping at the empty air around me. The room was still. No movement. But the breathing had been so clear, so human, it couldn't have been a dream. I barely slept after that. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I was leaving. Screw the refund. Screw the review. I didn't care anymore. I packed my stuff as fast as I could, nearly tripping over my suitcase in my rush. I zipped it up, grabbed the handle, and froze. A shadow moved across the reflection of the TV screen. Behind me. Slow. That dragging walk. I spun around, but nothing was there. My heart was beating so hard, I felt nauseous. I dragged my suitcase to the front door and twisted the lock. It wouldn't budge, not even a little. The deadbolt was stuck in place, like someone was holding it from the other side. I yanked harder. Nothing. That was when I heard a voice behind me, soft, hoarse, like someone whose vocal cords were torn up. "Please, don't leave me alone again." Every muscle in my body froze. I didn't turn around. I didn't breathe. The voice was right behind my shoulder, and something cold brushed my arm. A hand, or fingers, or something that had the shape of a hand but not the warmth of one. I threw my weight into the lock, ramming my shoulder into the door until it finally gave with a loud crack. I stumbled outside into the sunlight, dragging my suitcase down the driveway with shaking hands. I didn't look back. I drove straight to a hotel and checked in using cash, leaving my phone turned off. I felt safer, but not safe. Not really. Not after what I'd seen or what I thought I'd seen. I kept thinking about that voice, that hand, that smell in the room. I slept maybe 2 hours that night. The next morning, the Airbnb app pinged me. A new message from Daniel. My stomach knotted. "You checked out early," he wrote. "Everything okay?" I didn't answer. A few minutes later, he sent another message. A picture. I clicked it without thinking. I wish I hadn't. It was the bedroom in the Airbnb. My bedroom. And in the corner of the room, facing the wall, stood a man. His clothes were filthy. His hair hung in greasy strands. His skin looked gray, like he hadn't been outside in months. He was barefoot, and in the photo, he wasn't standing still. He was turning his head toward the camera, turning it unnaturally far. And his eyes, God, his eyes looked like wet marbles, too bright and too wide. I dropped the phone and nearly vomited. Daniel texted again. That was the previous guest. He booked for a month last year. He never checked out. Police never found him. Said he must have left on foot. Another message. I guess he liked you. Then, he never comes out for anyone. And finally, next time, tell me if you need to leave early. I could have helped keep him calm. I blocked the number instantly. I changed hotels again. I even cut my trip short and flew home early. But even now, nights feel wrong. Sometimes I wake up to the sound of soft breathing in the dark corner of my room. Sometimes I feel fingers brush my arm. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear that same voice whispering from the dark, "Please, don't leave me alone again." And I know, deep down, he's still with me. Because you don't just walk away from somebody who never checked out. You bring them with you.